Let's talk about Ed, Edd, and Eddy. Three friends that all coincidentally have the same name spend their days trying everything they can think of to fleece the neighborhood kids. They'll do anything you need for a mere quarter. And why are they chasing the almighty quarter? For the sweet, succulent, worst candy in history, the Jawbreaker. No, seriously. Danny Antonucci picked the Jawbreakers for Ed, Edd, and Eddy because it was just the single worst candy that he could think of. But because the Eds were such a success, it almost single-handedly revitalized their popularity. If you're like me, you probably remember the Eds having a very specific formula. Every episode would have the trio coming up with some kind of scam, getting something in the short term, but losing it all at the end. I recently rewatched the whole series for a project later this year, and I noticed something really peculiar. That's not how the show works. At all. I mean, first of all, a good chunk of the episodes aren't even about trying to get money. From Fat Freaky to trying to stop the report cards, the Eds do have a wide variety of interests. But, as broke as Eddy claims to be, and despite how the show portrays them, the Eds actually do come out on top, and it happens a lot more often than you might expect. Even down to the first episode, the Ed Touchables. The Eds get a bunch of money for trying to catch the serial toucher, and they never end up losing the money in the end. While Sarah may have caused them to lose the Jawbreakers that they were currently eating, when they cost a nickel, the Eds are clearly able to buy a whole lot more than just those three. So I had a really stupid question. How much money do the Eds actually make throughout their adventures? Of course, when you ask questions like this, you have to keep in mind, this is a cartoon, and the makers of said cartoon probably had other things on their mind, like making the jokes actually funny. So depending on which rules we follow, and what we decide to count, there's actually a wide variety of different answers that you're gonna get. Back to the Ed Touchables for an example. When the Eds get a bunch of money for catching said serial toucher, we could count up all the coins individually, or we could count everyone who pays. They will give you different answers. Me personally, I'm going to be counting the customers for the purposes of this video. It's not that I mind counting up all of the individual coins in every single episode. I have the time to do this insane project after all, it's just... So, in the episode A Glass of Warm Ed, the Eds open Edmart, where they sell all of the food that Ed pilfered during his sleepwalking. Johnny asks for Chunky Puffs, and then this happens.
That'll be 50 cents!
You saw that, right? Johnny puts 4 coins in the jar. Now, you can get 50 cents with 4 coins. A quarter, a nickel, and 2 dimes. But, from a distance, we have to assume that all coins that aren't pennies look exactly the same in this show. Then I realized counting up the coins would probably give us more problems than it'd solve in the end. Many of the episodes also start with the Eds in the middle of a scam before the actual plot starts up. I think we can all agree that even if Eddy isn't smart enough to ask for money up front, he's definitely greedy enough to ask for the money up front. So, my rule number 2. For these starting scams, if we don't see the kids getting a refund or mentioning one, I'm going to assume that Eddy is keeping the money. Unless it's logical that the money wouldn't be up front. The restaurant scam, for example. You don't pay at a restaurant until the food is served. And unless a price is stated, I'm going to assume 25 cents per customer. And yes, Plank counts as a separate customer than Johnny. And finally, I'm counting all of the Eds as one entity. A couple of times throughout the show, we see the Eds getting a quarter from each other. For our purposes, this is a cash-neutral move. I'm doing this mainly because of Every Which Way But Ed. Not only do we see a pastry scam in which we can't really gauge if the money was lost, but Double D also pays the other 2 Eds 50 cents in a flashback that was probably spent eons ago. Now, without further ado, there are 130 episodes, 4 specials, and a movie. Like I said before, a good amount of the episodes don't have anything to do with money at all, so we can ignore them outright. Here's a list of them, from Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, Season 4, and the rest. And as you might imagine, there are plenty of episodes where the scam fails before the Eds get anything, or the kids end up getting a full refund, cash-neutral episodes. Once again, Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, Season 4, and the rest. However, as you might be able to guess, there's a surprising amount of episodes left. So let's start with our first real category. The episodes where the Eds gain an objective amount of money and actually get to keep it to the end of the episode. In Avasti Eds, the Eds get 25 cents each from Johnny and Jimmy. The Cankers do attack and sink their boat, but at no point do we ever see the Eds losing their money. In Home Cooked Eds, Rolf gives Eddy 50 cents to wash his tractor and use his bathroom. In Shoe Ed, the Eds get 50 cents total for getting rid of Johnny. They do get trapped in the box at the end of the episode, with Johnny demanding increasing amounts to get them out of the box, but Eddy never does give in. He ends the episode with those 50 cents. So, as far as I'm concerned, he keeps them. In Mirror Mirror on the Ed, Plank says they'll give Ed a quarter if he acts like Plank, and Ed complies. In Wish You Were Ed, Rolf pays a full $1 for the magic shoe. While Ed does beat up Eddy and Double D at the end, we never see Rolf getting that $1 back. In Dim Lit Ed, Eddy sells an iguana to Kevin for 25 cents. In Don't Rain on My Ed, Johnny and Plank each pay 25 cents to explore the future. In An Ed in the Bush, Ralph flips a quarter into the woods to detect that the Eds are pranking them. One size fits Ed, Sarah and Jimmy throw a quarter each into the Eds wishing well. In Too Smart for His Own Ed, Eddie wins $1 from Kevin by betting on Ed in the spelling bee. And all Eds are off, Ed wins the bet between the 5 guys, netting him $1.25 total. Or 75 cents if we don't include Eddie and Double D's quarters. And finally, in Ed Pass It On, while the restaurant scam fails, Jimmy bribes Eddie with $1 to get in. And this isn't even close to everything that the Eds earn throughout the entire series. This is just cut and dry. Yes, this is absolutely what they did earn exactly this much, and we can all be happy and agree on it. But it's going to get a little bit more complicated and debatable from here on out. Next up is the cash that's easy to infer. We might get slightly different answers from here on out, but this next part is in the ballpark of what most people would agree on. The Ed Touchables falls here. Kevin, Jimmy, Sarah, Rolf, and Naz each pay the Eds to deal with the serial toucher. Once again, we're counting customers and not coins. 5 of them gets the Eds $1.25. In Dawn of the Eds fish up some bottles from a dumpster. Eddie decides that he wants to trade them in for ticket fare at the latest R-rated monster movie, which they never end up actually seeing, which is probably best since standard recycling fare is 5 cents per glass bottle, and I'm being generous with that test tube there. 8 bottles is 40 cents. Similarly, in For the Ed by the Ed, the Eds are drinking a 9-pack of soda for recycling. We'll give them another 45 cents there. In A Glass of Warm Ed, Eddie charges 50 cents for Johnny's Chunky Puffs. We're going to assume that Eddie is going to charge the same price to the other 4 kids we see coming for breakfast, which is a cool $2.50. One of their most profitable ventures ever. Similarly to No Ed. You probably expected this one to be cash neutral. It's the Canadian Squirt Guns episode. And as we all know, the Cankers take the jar of money at the end. However, when I was watching this episode, I noticed that the jar that the Cankers took is kinda light. There's only a few quarters in there. And the Canadian squirt guns cost 50 cents a pop. 6 buyers, 2 squirt guns per customer? That's $6 total. And then I realized something. Eddie actually did something smart for once. When he got the $6 for the Canadian squirt guns, he actually fucking took it home and stored it away. As such, the Eds make bank in this episode. They also make bank in Rent an Ed. During the circus performance, Double D literally says,
"Fortunate for us, they didn't ask for a refund, Eddie."
7 audience members, including Plank, at 25 cents per, that's $1.75. And this isn't even all the money they make in this episode. It costs 50 cents to get into the sauna, and while Jimmy and Sarah don't pay, Ralph, Naz, and Kevin are already there. That's another $1.50. And Ralph has one of those 25-cent towels. So, all in all, this episode is $3.50. It's also worth noting that this episode does bring up the Eds paying for the damages they cause. I'm obviously not counting that because...
Lots of hurt. Want the onions?
Okay, fine, I'm a chicken.
Ed?
Debt forever is the answer if we do that. It Came From Outer Ed is one of the more debatable selections here. All the kids are gathered to watch Ed beat up Evil Tim. It's never even hinted whether or not Eddie charged admission, but this is Eddie we're talking about, so yes, he did. 7 audience members, $1.75. In Boys Will Be Ed, Jimmy's got a sandwich that the Ed sold, 25 cents. Little Ed Blue forced me to break my counting customers not coins rule. I'm not too burnt by it, because we do really see that these coins really are quarters this time around, and counting the customers is kind of impossible here. Seeing how much everyone bought in the chaos of the food fight is downright impossible. So, for movie admission, Eddie is shown to have 11 quarters, and he gets another 6 of them for the food fight. If you count the coins here, this totals $5.25. I wish I didn't have to count the coins, but unfortunately with this particular episode, there really is no other choice. In Postcards from the Ed, Rolf, Naz, Jimmy, and Sarah are on the Egyptian tour. Assuming they paid up front, that's $1. In Take This Ed and Shove It, Eddie gets 5 quarters for his career scam, $1.25. In Out with the Old, In with the Ed, Johnny, Rolf, and Kevin each buy one of Eddie's summer burgers, for 75 cents total. Of course, to be fair, it's not all summertime fun for the Eds. As much as the Eds do gain, there are episodes where they actually lose some. They come out negative or spend the money themselves. Once again, the Ed Touchables, the Eds each buy jawbreakers that
cost a nickel.
This episode is actually infamous for this line, because, as we all know, jawbreakers cost a quarter in every other episode. Except no, they don't. Nowhere in the entire series is it ever stated that the jawbreaker costs anything other than a nickel, except in Don't Rain on My Ed, in which they're free for Customer Appreciation Day. But why does Eddie always ask for quarters then? Because there are 3 Eds. That'd be 15 cents. and the smallest coin that totals 15 cents is a quarter. Anyway, the Eds spend 15 cents in this episode. They also spend another 15 and take this Ed and shove it. Look Into My Eds is another episode like the Canadian Squirt Guns one. The Eds get a bunch of cash and lose when the Cankers end up on the scene. So I thought this was going to be cash neutral. But no. Monkey Kevin here gets a quarter from Double D, meaning that the Eds collectively lose 25 cents. In Gimme Gimme Never Ed, I can assume that the Eds got 25 cents for teaching Jimmy how to surf, and they get another 75 cents from playing Thrill Seeking. However, as Eddy flies through the air, we see 6 coins fall out of Eddy's pocket. These are all clearly labeled as quarters, which means that this episode is a 50-cent loss. And Eddy could have really used those quarters. In Ed 11, Double D and Ed each pay the Cankers a 50-cent bribe to escape. Eddy doesn't have the money for reasons, and as such, he can't escape the Cankers. Meaning we're at a pretty respectable $29.30. This is a number that I can be satisfied with. And if you'd like just a general going answer, this is probably the best you're gonna get. It's just, not 100% accurate. Because, now we have to talk about our final category. The episodes that complicate matters. I mean, even more. It's a cartoon after all. So things aren't going to be straightforward, and a lot of episodes have a lot of loose threads. Some of them I think we can all agree on. In Sir Ed a Lot, Ed claims that he's being paid to babysit Sarah. And despite how confident Eddy is in this, picture, it's not likely that Ed's mom is going to be fooled. So, no money here. I feel similar with the lawn mowing scam and Keeping Up with the Eds. So Eddy makes everyone's grass grow, and then the Eds cut it, without telling anyone what they're doing. So from everyone else's perspective, literally nothing happened. No cash for Eddy. Read all about Ed, though, is where things do start getting complicated. Double D says they'll only receive payment if the newspapers are properly delivered, and we see the Eds at least trying to clean up their mess. But does the rain destroy the papers? Does Double D lose his paper out because of the havoc they unleashed? We'll never know, and we never will figure out how much money that Double D would have gotten for the paper route. We don't have enough clues to infer anything. And we'll work for Ed, and later the other Eds work for Rolf. Rolf does go on and on about docking their pay, but we can assume that it never gets to 0, or below 0. But it's never stated how much Ed actually earns. We don't even know if these jobs are carried through with the rest of the series. I can assume that Ed does keep his job with Rolf, because Rolf tends to trust Ed with more tasks in future episodes. But it really is only an assumption, and you can play it either way. In No Speak to Ed, Eddy gets a shit ton of Korean cash. Double D says this.
Oh dear, this is foreign currency, Eddy. Virtually worthless in its present state.
Which is true. You're going to be hard-pressed to use Korean currency in a North American shop. But it is possible to take it to a money changer. It's not easy for a kid to find, but it's not impossible. And Eddy does keep this Korean cash until the end of the episode. But who knows, maybe he did do that in the end, because there's one other episode, a very complicated one that kind of made me want to bunk this whole project. Here's Mud in Your Ed. At first, it's simple. Eddy scams Jimmy out of a quarter, and then Ed uses that quarter on an amusement ride. Simple, cash-neutral episode. But Rolf sees that Jimmy is sad, and decides to help Jimmy get revenge. Then, Rolf offers Eddy a magic money tree seed, which will only cost him...
Well, this is just off the top of Rolf's head, but Rolf would like all your worldly possessions.
This is why it's a bad idea to take cartoons seriously, ladies and gentlemen. But you want to know what's really funny about this? After Eddy trades all of his stuff, we only see his bedroom 3 times in the entire series afterwards. And one of them is in the far future, so it doesn't count. The second time, the only time in all of season 5 and 6 combined, is in Cleanliness is Next to Edliness, which I don't count because the episode sucks. And the third time is in the movie. So if you do skip that one terrible episode from season 5, you could just kind of assume that, yeah, Rolf has all of Eddy's stuff for the rest of the series. Although that does make Smile for the Ed even worse and far more demented. But yeah, where these final episodes fall is totally up to you. I'm just not going to include any of them because they make my head hurt. $29.30 might not be the most accurate answer, but it's the best one that you're gonna get. So, how many Jawbreakers is that? Assuming that they cost a nickel each, because the series never ever does outright say that they cost a quarter, the Eds have enough of the green stuff for 586 Jawbreakers. That's 195 for each Ed, with one lone Jawbreaker left over. And I suppose that brings us to the greatest question: who gets the last one?